You've been lied to your entire life about what it takes to master something. They told you to pick one thing, dedicate 10,000 hours, and eventually you'd become great. But the most successful people on earth never followed that advice. They broke every rule about mastery and discovered something the system doesn't want you to know. Master anything, everything. The game was rigged from the start, not against your talent or intelligence, but against your understanding of how mastery actually works. The richest, most influential minds in history weren't specialists. They were something far more dangerous. They were learners who refused to be contained. In the next few minutes, I'm going to dismantle every lie you've been fed about mastery. Dismantle every lie. Stay until the end, because the final piece changes everything. The mastery lie. Let's start with the biggest lie you were ever sold. The idea that mastery means spending your entire life doing one single thing. Specialization. That's the word they used to trap you. Schools taught you to pick a major. Career coaches told you to find your niche. Society rewarded the specialist and mocked anyone curious about more than one subject. But here's what nobody told you. The 10,000-hour rule, popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, was ripped completely out of context. The original research by Anders Ericsson focused specifically on deliberate practice in structured fields like chess and classical music. The biggest misconception about expertise is that practice alone is sufficient. It was never meant as a universal formula. Yet an entire generation built their careers around it. They picked one path, closed every other door, and wondered why they felt stuck. The specialist knows more and more about less and less, until they know everything about nothing. In a world that transforms overnight, that's the most dangerous position to be in. Trapped by design. But this brings us to something most people have never considered. Learning to learn. What if the most valuable skill in the world isn't any specific skill at all? What if it's the ability to learn? Every billionaire, every inventor, every person who changed the world shared one common trait. They could learn anything. Elon Musk didn't study rocket science in college. He read textbooks, questioned experts, and applied first principles thinking to master an entirely new domain. I think most people can learn a lot more than they think they can. The secret isn't intelligence, it's a learnable process. Neuroscience calls it metacognition, the awareness of how your own mind learns. When you understand how you learn, you can accelerate mastery in any field. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Your brain doesn't care what you're learning, it only cares how you learn it. Students trained in metacognitive strategies outperformed peers by 40% across every subject. Not because they were smarter, because they understood their own mind. And this leads us to the advantage nobody is talking about. Generalist edge. Here's the uncomfortable truth that destroys everything you were told about career success. Generalists outperform specialists in almost every meaningful measure. Generalist. David Epstein spent years researching this for his book Range, and the evidence is overwhelming. The most impactful inventors cross domains rather than deepening expertise in a single area. The people who thrive aren't those who dug deeper into one well. They're the ones who connected dots across multiple wells. Leonardo da Vinci wasn't just a painter. He was an engineer, anatomist, architect, and inventor. His art became legendary because he brought knowledge from everywhere into it. Connect the dots. Nobel Prize winners are 22 times more likely than average scientists to have artistic hobbies. Crossing domains gives you perspective that specialists can never access. The future belongs to those who combine what others keep separate. If this is reshaping how you think about mastery, hit like and subscribe to unlock the rest of this mastery blueprint. What comes next might be the most powerful concept in this entire video. Skill stacking. There's a concept that separates the good from the truly unstoppable, and it has nothing to do with talent. It's called skill stacking. Stack skills, multiply. Scott Adams, creator of Dilbert, explained it perfectly. He wasn't the best artist. He wasn't the funniest writer. He wasn't the sharpest businessman. But he combined decent drawing, good humor, and business knowledge into something nobody else could replicate. If you want something extraordinary, become very good at 2 or more things rather than the best at one. When you stack skills, you create a unique intersection that belongs only to you. You don't need to be the best at anything, you need to be the only one at your combination. A programmer who understands psychology builds better products. A scientist who writes well gets more funding. A speaker who masters storytelling moves thousands to action. The combination of skills is always more powerful than any single skill. Each skill you add doesn't just add value, it multiplies everything. But most people don't realize that failure plays the most critical role in this process. Failure fuel. Most people run from failure like it's a disease, but the fastest learners treat failure as the most valuable data they will ever receive. When you make a mistake, your brain releases a chemical cocktail that strengthens the neural pathways involved. Failure isn't just feedback, it's fertilizer for growth. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before creating the light bulb. Each failure systematically eliminated wrong answers and brought him closer to the solution. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. The problem is school conditioned you to believe failure means you're not good enough. So you quit before the real learning begins. Fail forward fast. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. A Columbia University study found that when students learned about the struggles of famous scientists, their own performance improved dramatically. Not their talent, their willingness to persist. Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. But persistence alone won't save you without the right shortcut. 80/20 shortcut. What if you don't need to learn everything about a subject to master it? Shortcut. The Pareto principle reveals that in nearly every domain, 20% of the knowledge produces 80% of results. The first 20 hours of focused practice can take you further than most people get in years. 20% rules. Josh Kaufman demonstrated this in his research on rapid skill acquisition. The major barrier to skill acquisition isn't intellectual, it's emotional. When you identify the critical 20%, you achieve functional mastery at a speed that seems impossible to others. Think about language learning. You don't need 50,000 words. The most common 300 words cover 65% of daily conversation. Smart learners don't work harder, they identify what actually matters. 1. Identify the critical 20%. 2. Practice that segment intensely. 3. Ignore the rest until later. This applies to everything: cooking, coding, investing, music. Perfection is the enemy of progress. But there's a dangerous trap that destroys even the smartest learners. Obsession trap. Society glorifies obsession. Hustle culture tells you to eat, sleep, and breathe one thing until you succeed. But research tells a dramatically different story. Obsession doesn't create masters, it creates burnout. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that harmonious passion leads to significantly better performance than obsessive passion. Passion that controls you destroys. Passion you control creates. The people who master anything aren't those grinding themselves into dust. They're the ones who rotate between challenges, keeping their minds fresh and their curiosity alive. Balance beats burnout. Think about elite athletes. The best performers don't exclusively train their primary sport, they cross-train relentlessly. Basketball players study dance. Martial artists practice yoga. Swimmers lift weights. Diversity of practice creates true depth of mastery. The same principle applies to your mind. Exploring different domains gives your brain raw material to make connections specialists can never see. And this leads us to perhaps the most urgent truth you need to hear. Adapt or die. The world is changing faster than at any point in human history. Careers that existed 10 years ago have vanished. Skills that were valuable 5 years ago are already obsolete. Adapt. The World Economic Forum estimates 65% of children entering school today will work in jobs that don't yet exist. If you've built your identity around one skill, one industry, you are one disruption away from losing everything. And that disruption is already here. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Generalists thrive because when the landscape shifts, they don't freeze, they pivot. Pivot, don't panic. Amazon started selling books. Now they run the internet. Netflix mailed DVDs. Now they produce films. The ability to reinvent yourself is the ultimate competitive advantage. They survived not because they were best at one thing, but because they could become the best at the next thing. The measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And this connects to a hidden superpower most people overlook: transfer power. Here's the hidden superpower of the generalist: skill transfer. When you learn deeply in one area, that knowledge doesn't stay locked in that domain. It migrates, it connects, it transforms everything else you know. Every skill you learn is a key that unlocks doors you didn't know existed. A chess player develops strategic thinking that improves business decisions. A musician develops pattern recognition that enhances coding ability. A martial artist develops discipline that transforms financial habits. Skills transfer, multiply. Neuroscience calls this far transfer the ability to apply knowledge from one context to a completely different one. People with diverse skill sets are dramatically better at it. Creativity is just connecting things. Jobs studied calligraphy in college. Everyone thought he was wasting time. Years later, that knowledge gave the Macintosh its beautiful typography and changed computing forever. Nothing you learn is ever wasted. It is waiting for the right connection. Every skill is a key. Every door leads somewhere unexpected. And this brings us to the final and most important piece, the master code. Everything I've shared today comes down to one fundamental truth. Mastery is not about perfecting one thing. It's about perfecting how you learn anything. Everything. The master code is a mindset. The unshakable belief that you can walk into any room, any field, any challenge, and figure it out. Not because you're gifted, because you've built the system for learning itself. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. The world doesn't reward people who know things. It rewards people who learn things faster than the world changes. Learn, unlearn, relearn. You were never meant to master one thing, you were built to master the art of learning itself. Stop asking what to learn next. Start asking how to learn better. Because the moment you master learning, you master everything it touches. The code has always been inside you, waiting to be activated. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. That's the master code, and now it's yours. Think about where you were when this video started. You believed mastery meant choosing one narrow path and walking it forever. Now you know the truth. Master the process. The most powerful minds in history weren't specialists trapped in one lane. They were learners who treated every domain as another chapter in the same book. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. You don't need 10,000 hours. You don't need permission. You don't need to choose just one thing. You need the courage to learn everything and the system to do it efficiently. Start today. Pick something you've always wanted to learn. Give it 20 focused hours. Watch what happens. If you made it this far, comment Master Learner to prove you've cracked the code. Your mind is either programmed for limitation or for mastery. Now you know how to reprogram it. If this video rewired something in you, subscribe. There's more to uncover.